If you start researching these alien abduction experiences or these alien sighting experiences, which there are now over 7 million of them documented in MUFON, you start to see a similarity between the stories and repetitiveness with some of the visitations or sightings or whatever you want to call them.
Billy Carlson recently broke his silence on UFO sightings and aliens. It might sound crazy at first, but he claims that he has fallen victim to one of the alien abductions.
I was working on this huge project. Came home, sat down on the couch, and all of a sudden, the room just turned this lavender color. The TV went and just shut off. And when I turned around, these two beings were in my face, and I was screaming.
How did this experience change him as a person? Join us as we unravel the truth about the existence of UFOs and aliens that may roam around this universe. Carlson believes that he saw a UFO because the technology wasn't advanced to create an alien reproduction vehicle, or ARV for short. The difference between these two is that an ARV has proper schematics and is built completely differently. ARVs are reverse engineered because humans were interested in the concept of gravity control propulsion. A lot of research has been done on this phenomenon since the 1950s. And yes, there have been a lot of connections to alien life. Though gravity control propulsion goes against the theory of relativity, there has been a lot of funding to research the concept. By 1981, scientists and engineers were able to reverse engineer the ARV that was part of the Roswell incident of 1947. Now, the Roswell incident is famous for being one of the more controversial UFO-related events in history. It led to a ton of conspiracy theories, books, documentaries, debates, and, in a way, Billy Carlson's entire career. In early July 1947, a rancher named William Brazel discovered debris scattered across a field near Corona, New Mexico, which is around 75 miles north of Roswell. The rancher described the material as metallic sticks, tin foil, and rubber-like sheets. It wasn't normal for things like these to be seen around the field. When Brazel reported the incident to the local sheriff, he immediately contacted the Roswell Army Airfield. On July 8th, the RAAF issued a press release stating that they had recovered a flying disc from the crash site. Newspapers knew that this was alien-related and the world was shocked. But the Army knew that they had to be smart about all of this. They couldn't let the public panic and retracted the initial announcement. They covered up the story, saying the debris was actually from a weather balloon and not a flying saucer that they've seen on television. The Roswell Daily Record published a new article with the headline, "RAF Captures Flying Saucer on Ranch in Roswell Region." This was followed by a retraction and a replacement headline that reads, "Army debunks Roswell flying disc as weather balloon." People thought that was the end of the story, but fast forward to the 1990s, the U.S. government declassified documents that revealed the debris found at Roswell was part of a top-secret project called Project Mogul. This involved the use of high-altitude balloons to detect sound waves from Soviet atomic bomb tests. Many believed that the debris was from Project Mogul and not an ARV, or unidentified foreign object. After all, the Roswell incident did take place around the time of the war. Yet many kept asking questions and believed that the government was covering something up, that something is evidence of extraterrestrial life. Over the years, there have been many witnesses coming forward with claims that the wreckage recovered at Roswell was not from a weather balloon, but actually from an alien spacecraft. Believe it or not, some of these witnesses were ex-military too. Other extreme conspiracies say that the alien bodies recovered from the crash site were taken to a secret military base. You might know this base to be known as Area 51 in Nevada. The government was pushed to release further statements in 1994 and 1997. The announcement in 1994 was them repeating that the crash that happened around 50 years ago was from a weather balloon used during the war. The report in 1997 stated that the quote, bodies recovered from the crash site were just test dummies used in high-altitude balloon tests. Between the years 1947 and the late 1990s, technology was advancing. It was slow and steady, but just the right rate to reverse engineer an ARV. However, Carlson thinks that the resources that humans have are still not enough to create a true replica of an ARV. So from his experience, he believes he saw a UFO, which isn't limited to a specific schematic as compared to an ARV. A UFO could be a disc-shaped spacecraft or any other unidentified object, as the name suggests. But Carlson said that this wasn't the first time someone like him, being an African American, had an experience like this.
Barney Hill was a black guy who came out, I think it was in the 60s or 70s, about his abduction situation with him and his wife. And him and his wife were abducted, and they gave an account of what these beings showed them as where they came from. And nobody knew where the Zeta Reticuli star system was at that time. It didn't exist in our star maps. Later on, it came out. A person says, wait a minute, and they put it together and said, this is Zeta Reticuli. We found this star system now. Now we know where they say they were from.
The Barney and Betty Hill incident is one of the most famous and well-documented cases of an alien abduction in the United States. It all happened in 1961, when America was going through some of the biggest alien conspiracies they ever witnessed. Barney and Betty Hill were heavily involved in social work. Barney was a postal worker and civil rights activist, while his wife was a social worker. The interracial couple lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, back when a relationship like this wasn't really accepted by society. Either way, they were both respected members of their community and involved in the Unitarian Church and the NAACP. On September 19th, the Hills were returning to their home after visiting Niagara Falls and Montreal for vacation. While driving south on Route 3 through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, they noticed an odd light too bright to be from a street lamp. They also noticed the light was moving and something was terribly wrong. At first, the Hills thought that what they were seeing was just a shooting star or satellite. Luckily, they had a pair of binoculars in the car and stopped to see what was in the sky. Betty saw that the object was spinning and flashing lights of all kinds of colors. The two ignored it and continued with their drive. The only problem was that the light started following them. Near Indian Head, the object came out of nowhere, and according to Barney, human-like figures were looking at them through the windows of the flying object. With everything going on in the news, especially the Roswell incident, Barney knew what was happening. He warned Betty that they were about to get captured. The couple sped away only to hear rhythmic beeping sounds coming from the trunk of their car. This led to a tingling and drowsy feeling taking over them. They drove off for a while but realized they were unconscious for quite a while. Turns out they drove 35 miles south with hardly any recollection of their trip. Their journey was 2 hours longer than expected. That's not all, because Betty's dress was torn with pink powder on it while Barney's shoes were scuffed. They found shiny circles on their car's trunk that caused a compass needle to spin like crazy when near them. Both of them were very uneasy and had unexplained impulsive behavior, like keeping their luggage near the back door rather than unpacking it. It was as if they were recovering from trauma. The worst part is, they couldn't remember a single thing. The next few events were what really spooked some people and conspiracy theorists. Betty began experiencing vivid dreams for 5 nights in a row. Her dreams showed her the interactions with the beings they encountered in great detail. She described being taken aboard a spacecraft, examined by humanoid figures, and talking to them in a different language. The dreams were getting out of hand, so in 1963, 2 years after the incident, the Hills decided to take hypnosis sessions with Dr. Benjamin Simon. They had weekly sessions from January to June 1964. Under hypnosis, both husband and wife recalled the fateful night with detailed stories from each side. Barney and Betty said that they were on board and had to go through a series of medical tests. Barney said that he was being escorted by a figure with big eyes. It was as if he was forced to do all those tests and felt like his life was in danger. He also recalls a cup-like device collecting what he thinks were sperm samples. Betty said something similar and said she was talking to their leader who showed her a star map that explained where they came from. The wildest part is that she actually drew the star map under hypnosis, and it's been of great interest ever since. So what did Dr. Simon conclude? He wasn't a firm believer in aliens or extraterrestrial life, and said that they were going through a shared experience of psychological aberration. This was rooted in being an interracial couple, something that was very rare in the early 1960s. After all, there was still a lot of discrimination against these couples during that time. It wasn't easy for the Hills to be active members of society without facing hate in one form or the other. Some psychologists have studied the entire incident years later and think that the whole experience was a fantasy inspired by Betty's dreams. Barney simply adopted the fantasy on a subconscious level. Astronomer Carl Sagan ruled out the star map too. He said that it lacked accuracy for it to be of any meaning. But the incident as a whole has been considered to be the most credible abduction story that has been documented. Barney Hill passed away a few years later in 1969 due to a cerebral hemorrhage. Betty, on the other hand, was a leading figure in the UFO community and would hold lectures talking about her valid experiences up until she died in 2004. Now, Carlson read further into the incident and mentioned that Betty's star map claimed that the aliens were from the Zeta Reticuli star system. This is a binary star system found in the Reticulum constellation. It can be seen at night from the southern hemisphere as a double star. These stars are estimated to be between 1.5 and 3 billion years. They're so massive, their mass is approximately 96%, that of the Sun, with a radius that is 92% similar to the Sun. The interesting part is that if an Earth-like planet was orbiting around the Zeta stars, the liquid on that planet's surface would have conditions favorable to host life. Although Carl Sagan debunked the whole star map that Betty drew from memory, Carlson said that no one had any prior knowledge of the Zeta Reticuli star system. The Hills weren't highly educated, nor did they know much about astronomy. The fact that Betty mentioned a constellation that not many astronomers were aware of in detail without any schooling made the whole incident 1,000 times more believable. This wasn't an elaborate scheme to get attention from the media. The Hills really were abducted by extraterrestrial life. Now, Bob Lazar, another UFO theorist, believes this whole story. He even had a chat with Carlson, and some of the things they discussed were shocking, to say the least. Lazar is a very controversial person in ufology and conspiracy theories. If this name is unfamiliar to you, he's most famous for his claims about working on the reverse-engineered AVR near Area 51 and an element that no one knew about before him. He first caught the attention of the media in the late 1980s when he sat for an interview with investigative reporter George Knapp on a Las Vegas television station. There, he claimed to have worked on extraterrestrial technology at a site called S4. This site is assumed to be located near Area 51. Lazar said that he was a physicist hired by the U.S. government to work on reverse engineering alien spacecraft at S4. He described the laboratory as being built inside of a mountain with hangar doors that were camouflaged to blend with the surrounding area. At first, people thought that he was bluffing and describing things seen in science fiction and fictional films. But what Lazar later revealed in his further interviews and findings had a large portion of the people believing every word he was saying. He said that the spacecraft he was working on was of extraterrestrial origin. The propulsion systems weren't common amongst the machines he was familiar with on Earth. On top of that, they had a gravity control system. Mind you, this was in the late 80s when technology like this was completely unheard of. The anti-gravity reactor, as he called it, was the craft's power source and used an unknown element as a source of fuel. Lazar also said that the propulsion system used a gravity wave amplifier to bend space-time. In simpler words, there was a way for the ship to go into lightspeed mode and travel great distances in a very short amount of time. Was anything he said true or taken from a Star Wars film? Well, When Lazar shared his experience and discovery of element 115, the world was hushed. He talked about the element and energy source in 1989, and back then, this element wasn't known to mankind. It didn't even exist in the periodic table. Lazar described it as a super-heavy element with properties beyond our imagination. Apparently, it was capable of generating a strong gravitational field when bombarded with protons. He then said that the U.S. government had a massive supply of element 115, and they're using it to stabilize the alien craft. There could be a time in the near future when the government will be able to weaponize the element. In 2003, Russia successfully synthesized element 115, which they later named moscovium. The only downside is that moscovium is very unstable with a half-life of less than a second. The very small half-life means that element 115 can't serve the same purpose that Lazar described. But the fact that he mentioned it in the first place shocked everyone. To top it all off, he mentioned it 20 years before its discovery. So when Russia synthesized it, everyone started re-watching clips of Lazar talking about it in 1989. People started questioning the existence of Area 51, too. It was as if Lazar was the leading man for all conspiracy theorists who all believed that the government was hiding something from the country. In 2010, Carlson had his second experience, which he claims ruined his entire family. He was working on Project Fort Terra Nova when he had his encounter with extraterrestrial life. He says that this is a $20 million project that involves building an underground shelter on a large scale. They're basically designed to protect up to 350 people from catastrophic events that include potential apocalyptic scenarios. So this isn't your average bunker that people hide in during an earthquake or tornado. Think of it as a safe haven for when the zombies take over. Since Carlson is an astronomer, he was researching equinoxes, which led to him realizing that the precession was speeding up by 2,000 to 3,000 years. This massive difference in the precession of the Earth could only mean that the Sun was orbiting something for breakaway speed.
The precession is speeding up by 2,000 or 3,000 years. That's a massive difference. What could cause that? So I started theorizing about it. I started saying,
he started studying old documents that talked about Nemesis in the Golden Year. It talked about the possibility of living in a binary solar system. Carlson then learned about potential orbital rates, which made him realize that the object responsible for this increase in precession speed was coming closer to our Sun. This could cause potential geological disasters, and since nothing of such was happening on Earth, something else was happening, and Carlson was almost able to crack it. The geological disasters weren't going to happen in a few days, weeks, or even years. It could take centuries. This is what led him to work on the project Fort Terra Nova. He wanted to build an underground safety shelter so that his future generation could survive the incoming threat. At first, he wanted to use shipping containers since those provide the most amount of space. But then a co-worker of his mentioned that the containers would be 90 degrees to the Earth's surface. Any incoming pressures could crack the corners and cause a gas leak within the container. Since there won't be any oxygen deep underground, anyone inside could instantly die thinking they were surviving an ongoing apocalypse. Now, a human on Earth suspected an imminent threat and was starting to take precautions. What if we weren't supposed to know what was going to happen in a few hundred years? Carlson said that whatever geological disaster that was going to happen would be because of the Sun, and it would all be gravitational. There won't be any explosions or spread of disease. He then recalled the time when he was relaxing after a long day of work and research at home, where he was watching ESPN. He looked out and noticed the whole sky was lavender, so he looked over to his shoulder to call his kids. Carlson wanted to share the moment with his boys, but noticed that no one was there. And what did he see when he turned forward? 2 gray aliens staring right through him.
Crazy work on this project, and I sat down on my couch to watch ESPN Sport Update. And the whole room turned lavender. And so I was like, wow.
He described these aliens as having slits for ears and 2 tiny dots for noses and another slit for a mouth that never opened or moved. They wore a body jumpsuit, and it appeared that they weren't doing anything physically. What Carlson felt was something in his head. His brain was shaking because he couldn't understand what was happening right before his eyes. He didn't feel the aliens trying to communicate with him. It wasn't verbal, nor was it telepathic. He tried running away and screamed for help, but no one heard him or answered his call. When Carlson watched them leave, he said that they didn't technically walk like a regular human being. Instead, they had a sort of bounce to them. This experience affected his relationship with his wife. His trauma scared his kids, and he said that he didn't make any money out of this incident because no one would believe him. The next day, he had the words worldwide telescope run through Carlson's mind. So he decided to hop on a search engine and search that phrase. He didn't really expect to find anything because these two words could mean anything. They could lead to images of a telescope and not have anything to do with his traumatic experience. But the first search result directed him to a website called worldwidetelescope.org. When he installed and opened the software, he found all the space probe data, every space mission, and every probe that went out from Earth. It was as if he struck gold on all the information he needed as an astronomer. One of the links directed him to the probe sent to Mars and allowed him to experience a complete panoramic view of the planet. When he connected different images together, he realized that it looked a lot like the Egyptian pyramids. This made him believe that the origin of the pyramids on Earth wasn't by humans thousands of years ago. A lot of people think that the construction of giant pyramids, like the ones we're familiar with, is impossible to build without any advanced technology. There were no special cranes, elevators, or drilling equipment to build them. How on earth did humans manage to do all that with their bare arms? In a way, these theories ruined Carlson and his life. The traumatic experience sent him in a downward spiral from one conspiracy to the other. There was a time when his wife slammed her brakes while driving because of the things he was saying. His encounter with the two gray aliens in 2010 made him talk like someone who had lost his mind. Carlson was scaring his kids and eventually lost his entire family after the divorce. The thing is, all theories and experiences, whether by the Hills, Bob Lazar, or even Billy Carlson, are all in a way being addressed by the government. The U.S. Senate reported an unidentified aerial phenomena and how it's related to the findings and claims made by Lazar in the late 1980s. In 2021, it was said that the reports on the UAPs were underway, and the Senate was waiting for them. The report was requested as part of the Intelligence Authorization Act. This single document has the possibility to either validate or completely dismiss Lazar's claims. It can confirm whether or not extraterrestrial life exists, either on this Earth in Area 51 or in outer space. More recently, as part of the Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris presidential debate, Trump promised that he would release official UFO footage and documents related to Jeffrey Epstein's infamous island. This could be a very twisted political tactic to get votes on Trump's end, but the fact that more attention on UFOs and extraterrestrial life is being brought to the public says a lot about the conspiracy theories over the years. Today, around 7% of the world's population are considered they've seen a UFO in their lifetime. In the United States, this number is on the rise with more and more sightings of unidentified flying objects. In fact, there has been an increase from 20 to 34% between the years 1996 and 2022. People who don't believe in extraterrestrial life fear that this emerging belief can be dangerous to society. They believe that any indication of UFOs or aliens can only be known by signals from faraway planets. Most of the belief is based on their thinking that the government is hiding the truth from its citizens. With Trump's promise of footage, it feels like the theories aren't a conspiracy anymore. It's now a political statement. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button to see more content.
Where are you getting this information again? Where is
the
this?
Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Indian Vedas.
So these are ancient Indian texts.
That's right.
5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Enuma Elish,
I just
which
want
is
to let
Sumerian. Okay. I read over 1,000 scriptures, cylinder. I have 1,500 books in my house that I've read. That's one. But I've read over 1,000 scriptures, cylinder scrolls, papyruses, ancient text tablets, you name it, from all around the world.
The secrets to today's technology and a lot more could be embedded in these ancient tablets Billy Carlson managed to lay his hands on.
You look at these tablets, and some of these beings appear to have arrived here about 450,000 years ago. Imagine being able to travel that distance 500,000 years ago. Where would they be right now? So when you understand how technology grows exponentially over time, like right now, I think Google just created a new quantum computer these people left behind such detailed records and information. It's a time capsule of information on stone tablets for us today to be able to decipher, break down, and understand, and that's what we're here to do now.
However, for the fact that this knowledge is not available to many, it's easily referred to as a scam.
Well, the conventional explanation is always going to the term mythology. They throw mythology around, left and right to cover up the fact that they have no clue or idea. So they turn it into mythology so they can kind of say it's all fantasy and fairy tales, and this is how they express themselves or how they understood the universe. It's all mythology, it's all fake, but in reality, it's not all fake.
Will these writings still be considered fake if they made it into some holy books? Maybe not.
So when you're reading things like the Epic of Gilgamesh, for people who don't know, is one of the oldest versions of a lot of the stories that you hear in the Bible. Very similar to them. There always seems to be a great flood. There's a few heroes. There's angry gods. There's a bunch of stuff going on.
With this information, the way almost that you and I see it today, these people saw something, experienced something, interacted with something, and he cataloged it, and it inspired him to write a complete translation of the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation. And he talks about the fact that that information was copied right from those tablets and put into the Old Testament of the Bible.
Though some of the stories from these ancient tablets seem to appear perfectly in the Bible, Billy Carlson believes that there were lots of errors and mistranslations, and they may be intentional or not. Mistranslations.
In the Ethiopian Bible and the Sinai Bible, there's about 12 to 14,000 differences than the more modernized King James Version. Well, for example, Moses never crossed the Red Sea. He crossed the Sea of Reeds, which is a closer, much smaller and easier sea to cross.
Right.
As a matter of fact, if you talk to geologists, which like I did,
Yeah.
you'll find if you do a geological rewind to go back in time with tectonic plate movements, a computer model will simulate that there was an actual tsunami in that area somewhere within that time frame, give or take 100 years or so.
Billy Carlson believes that somehow the Ark of Covenant could have entangled in these mistranslations as well.
So you see how stories get remixed. What's happened here was a natural disaster and perfect timing. But they then ended up in the desert with the Ark of the Covenant, which is well noted and documented in biblical text. We know for a fact that these people were not slaves. The people that were this exodus that left out of Egypt, they were the people who converted from believing in multiple gods to believing in the one God religion, monotheism, following Akhenaten. And he fled with all these people out of Egypt with the Ark of the Covenant. And that's why the powers that be sent an army after him. They're like, you took the source of our power with you. We gotta have that.
All right, so what was the Ark of the Covenant?
A super advanced technological machine. It was multi-purposeful. We know this because of the way that it's designed and what it reads, what it says, what it's capable of doing. It's a weapon, but it also has the capability of being a power source. So it does multiple things. And to handle it, you had to have lead. Okay, you had to have these special kind of boots on because it was a capacitor. And some scientists at several universities experimented with recreating the Ark using the instructions that are in the Bible. And it was so powerful, they had to shut it down.
What did the angels, the cherubs do? What were
the
they? The
cherubims at the top pointing each other? Electricity, yes, exactly. A big spark. When you look up the video on YouTube, you see a big spark jumping across an arc. That's the arc. That's why they call it the arc. It's the arc, which is the electromagnetic arc. It jumps from one cherubim to the next.
So this ark might just have been power source. And Billy suggests that the incense burnt around it may prove what it was really used for.
It's like when you see a laser show, they have to put that mist out there. It's the same exact thing.
Light the air.
Yes, exactly. Same exact thing. That's exactly what they did.
The claim that the ark was a power source is backed up by the disaster that struck some ancient people who had direct encounters with it.
They would die, their they would get what looked like radiation sickness. Their eyes
Right.
would start bleeding, their nose would start bleeding, their nails would fall off, their skin would boil, their hair would fall out. That sounds like radiation sickness.
The interesting part is that this ark had a weird connection to the Pyramid of Giza, as they were both used as free energy sources in the ancient civilization.
And the water running underneath the Great Pyramid would run underneath in that aquifer, and that moving water would then run right underneath the solid granite, magnetized granite that was there, crystal granite. Now, when you have running water against magnetized crystal granite, which is the base there, it creates physiostatic electricity. And so when the water shifted away, began to meander away, and I think it really happened after the last Pyramid War, it broke the stone computer, it broke the stone power generator. And so what they realized was we can take this ark and we could put it in this, they made this makeshift granite box, which is not a sarcophagus, but it's the same exact, I measured it, it's the same exact dimensions as what? The Ark of the Covenant. Identical dimensions, which means it fit right in that box. And so if you don't have the water, you need something else to arc the power, perfect location to put it in the king's chamber to send the energy through the apex so they can keep the wireless energy going.
Free
So
energy.
when Akhenaten took that, he took the power source for Egypt.
Also, against widespread knowledge, there was probably more than one such ark.
That is correct. There's more than one ark. There was more than one ark. They've all been taken now, so nobody knows where they are. The last one that we knew of was in Ethiopia at an Ethiopian church, and a guy discovered it there about 7 or 8 years ago, and he went public with it. And then within a year, it was stolen from there because there was no military, no police, no security, just some temple and church priests, guarding it. So they took it very easily, and that was the last one known of that was publicly available. The rest are probably in some type of a military bunker.
However, if this ark was a free energy source, why hasn't it been recreated for us in the modern world? Well, Billy Carlson probably has the answer.
Free energy puts everyone on the equal playing field. No more third world country. If you got energy and water, everybody's equal, and they don't want that. They want to keep the boot on the necks of the people and control and hoard the power in one region so they can dominate the rest of the planet.
Aside from that, further mistranslations seem to show up in some characters as well.
There's a person in a town far away who speaks ill of me. Go there and get over the town walls, kill the women, kill the children, kill infants, and bring the spoils of war back to me.
Whoa!
Now, what kind of God needs spoils of war?
You're God, you got everything.
Yeah.
So who do you think wrote this?
These are these Anunnaki people. See, they were these Atlantean leaders.
Yes.
It got to the point where they became greedy and they became self-made gods. And they really believed it. They were battling each other
Like
over
the pharaohs
resources.
of Egypt in a way?
Yeah.
Gotcha, you're drunk
battling
off
over
power.
resources and people. Wow. Battling and, just literally like fighting over who's controlling who. And how we all got to be different races.
Yeah.
That goes back to,
How did that happen?
that goes back to the Tower of Babel incident in the Bible, which comes out of the Sumerian tablets.
The story of these races then brings to us what Billy Carlson believes to be the origin of creation, the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki.
Okay, the Anunnaki, they are these beings that came from off-world.
So these are aliens.
These are aliens. Now, what's interesting about these aliens is that they're not little green men with antenna.
Yeah.
They're actually hominids, bilateral bipedal hominids. They look just like us. We look like them.
Okay.
We actually look like them.
Okay.
And the reason why is because we have their genetics and their DNA inside of our bodies.
So when the Anunnaki came to Earth, were there already Homo sapiens here?
Yes, good question. There were already not Homo
question.
sapiens, but hominids.
No, there weren't.
Our cousins.
Bad question. Come on.
They were Homo erectus. They were our cousins.
Yeah, they were.
But I believe that they were more intelligent than us spiritually.
Since some species of humans already existed at the time, the Anunnaki might have played some hanky-panky with their genes.
There's an existing being here, though, that we can add our essence to, talking about genetic modification, and get them to bear your load.
So don't make robots, make people that can
Right.
do your work for you.
Exactly.
Whoa.
And whatever they did to the humans wasn't for anything else but to enslave them in every way.
So when you start analyzing the text, you discover that there was an encampment in a place called South Africa at Adam's Calendar. Okay. Now at Adam's Calendar, there's actually the very first gold mines discovered. They're dating them back to about 200,000 years ago. And that's incredible because there's a building there that looks like a worn down structure. to get us to take orders from them, they inserted something called a worship gene, which was just discovered recently, that human beings have a gene inside of them that can be turned on and turned off. It can be turned off in a laboratory setting. It can also be turned off with a magnetic field around your head. And when it's off, you don't want to worship anything outside of yourself. You look inside, and when it's on, you look to get something from the outside. So this is incredible.
So they're just forcing human beings to do their work for them.
Yes.
That's crazy.
And that's how
Who
they
would do
bring them the offerings.
Yeah.
When you bring the offerings,
Yeah.
your best harvest and your fresh calves, that's their meat, that's their food.
This is what you see in the biblical text.
They're eating. That's their meals. They're not going to go out and hunt. In 2014, he was just laughing. He was showing me one of the altars. He said these people were so dumb. He just said his own people. He says they would line up in ancient times for miles to bring their best offerings to the head god. Wow. And the god was just putting them all this food in the storehouses. And he showed me where the storehouses were inside these temples. They would put these things in there. Then they had these other areas underneath the temple where other priests would go underneath and speak, and it would resonate their voice, and it would be the voice of God talking. And he takes us to the temples where they actually have the storehouses.
Getting hungry. Billy's getting hungry. It's like that damn barbecue.
Hey, man. So, listen.
Okay, so go. So you're there.
And then we're able to then put people into a box and put real controls on them and dominate them and secure them, bringing them food, bringing them sacrifices, bringing them money. The sacrifices were not for God. The sacrifices were so they can eat. So they weren't going to go hunting.
Yeah.
You know
right?
what I mean?
A lamb, sure.
Yeah, exactly. If you go to Egypt, you go to all these temples, you'll find the storehouses where all the sacrifices will be put and salted and stored and hung and dried so that these people can have food to eat, because they weren't going to go hunting for anything. They weren't going to grow any crops.
Worse still, they didn't only make them do their work, they also made them get loads of food as well.
When we show you where they would hide the food, where they'd take all the offerings and where they would store it, it was their grocery store.
According to the ancient texts, all these continued until a new civilization began after the Great Flood.
In this text, he writes about coming to this planet after the Great Flood and seeing the temples of ancient Kemet sticking up out of the mud, and actually going on a mission to help rebuild civilization. Not that it was for the first time, but he's rebuilding it to a high level. When he said, go around the planet and duplicate what we did here. So now I go, you and I, we're already in Africa, right? You go to Europe, you go over to Mesoamerica, and you are ruling over people. Now, what does a farmer do right now if they have cows? They brand the cow. So in case my cow wanders off, you know, oh, that's Farmer Jim's cow. We got to get it back to him.
So everybody made their people look like them.
That's
so
right.
they knew these are our property.
Let us make man in our image.
This time, the ancient beings were cloning people to own them. But since that wasn't fast enough, they devised another means.
They were making these people, but they couldn't make them fast enough, and these people couldn't have sex and reproduce on their own.
So
they got very frustrated. So ISIS says, okay, I have an idea. I'm gonna take the egg out of one of the beings and put it in my womb and take it to term. So it says in the text that they literally mixed their genetics with this egg, put it in her womb. So that's now making what we call a zygote in modern technology terms, right? In vitro fertilization, puts it in her womb, takes it to term for 10 months, and then gives birth to the Adamu, which means first man. So that's where we get the first genetically perfected Homo sapien.
So before that, they were all...
They were Homo something, but they weren't like us. They couldn't reproduce. Like if you take a tiger and a lion and mate them, it'll have a ligand, but the ligand can't reproduce. Right. So that's the situation. That's what we had going on.
With this new development, they could have formed a new generation of beings.
The generations of ISIS, the generations of ISIS, the Genesis, the Genesis.
Ooh, and Genesis is obviously the first book of the Old Testament.
Yes.
I'm doing the math right now.
He really is! He's doing the math! Whoa! So that's Adam.
Yes, Adam. Adam was then put into this Eden to mate with these other, they had mating time.
And soon enough, a new human was formed.
And take some of his DNA, clone that, make a woman, so they made Eve. Then she got pregnant. Okay, this works. They were not the first humans on this planet. They were probably 1 million in at that point, okay? So people who think that 8 billion people that we have now on Earth came from two people, have never studied genetics. Because if I start mating with my sister and so forth and so on, by the second generation, third generation, we're gonna have a whole bunch of people with disabilities and one eye and arms broken and small legs and all kinds of. So that's why they had the specific mating times and the people that you could mate with to make sure that they were not creating a small genetic pool. Once they figured that worked, they said, okay, let's isolate them in a certain part of the garden and begin to do this experiment with them. So Adam had Cain and Abel, and one got jealous because he kept taking the harvest, and he's like, you know what, I'm pissed off, I'm gonna kill my brother, right? And he says, I gotta kick you out of the garden. And so Cain says in the Bible, he says, the people out there will kill me. Wait, what people?
I thought there's no people.
I thought there was no people out there.
Yeah.
There's people out there already. Matter of fact, they might be barbaric. So he says, don't worry, I will put my mark on you. See, that's the brand. Put my brand on you. So he said, so that they will know your minds. So he put a brand on and let people know, hey, no, that's Enlil's guy. Don't mess with
fuck
him.
with him.
Exactly. That started the whole Canaanites. You see? That's where the Canaanites came out and built the whole thing and eventually migrated over to Mesoamerica.
According to Cain's account, there were people who already existed outside the garden, but not much was known about them. However, Billy Carlson might have seen into the secrets of these beings.
Got it.
The people there were advanced beyond belief. They had achieved a high level of advanced construction, waterways, irrigation, mathematics.
Is this
you name it.
Tigris and Euphrates?
Between the Tigris and the Euphrates, where the Garden of Eden is located. And so these people were extremely intelligent, but they were influenced by these Anunnaki Atlantean people who gave them the knowledge and taught them how to build and taught them how to do all of this. At the Tower of Babel, Yahweh, who is known as Enlil, he helps them to erect this, well, he builds his own tower first called the Duran Key, which means bond heaven earth. And then the humans, when he leaves to go somewhere, the humans build a similar structure. When he comes back, I guess it's probably months or years later, he sees that this thing is being built by humans, mimicking what their advanced culture had built. And he says, oh man, whatever their hearts desire, they will achieve it. He destroys the tower, just like it says in the Bible. And then he says, my seed shall not abide in man forever. His years shall be 120. That also made it into the biblical text. This is where the genetic modification came in. That 120 statement is powerful because at Harvard University, they just discovered that the lifespan of a human being maxes out at about 120 years.
Yeah.
And so he then decides to confuse the languages and move people around to different regions of the planet so that we couldn't collaborate.
This account in the ancient text was later proved after modern scientists tried to dig deep into the dark secrets.
What they discovered was between races, there's a 2% variance in DNA and genes.
Yeah.
2% would take multi-millions of years through natural evolution. Didn't take that long, only took 200,000 years. So what's going on here? Chromosome number 2, something happened to humans. It was taken out and fused together, right? Instead of having 48, we got 46. Why is that? Fused together, 2 telomere caps put on the end, limiting our lifespan. So we know that there was a genetic mutation around the same time, they're saying 200,000 years ago, the same time the tablets are roughly estimated to be written.
After all their atrocities, the Anunnakis themselves had to get a taste of their medicine when wars broke out among them.
You couldn't get back what you were talking about, you couldn't mate with somebody unless you were given a scheduled time to mate or you get in trouble and punished. But no baby's coming. So they said, damn it, so let's go ahead and take some of his DNA, clone that, make a woman, so they made Eve. Then she got pregnant. Okay, this works. They were not the first humans on this planet. They were probably a million in at that point, okay? So people who think that 8 billion people that we have now on Earth came from 2 people have never studied genetics. Because if I start mating with my sister and so forth and so on, by the second generation, third generation, we're gonna have a whole bunch of people with disabilities and one eye and arms broken and small legs and all kinds of. You can't make 8 billion people.
What happened to all the Anunnaki and Thoth and all them?
They had 2 wars. The first Pyramid War almost eradicated them, but they started over again. The second Pyramid War, bad.
Apart from the internal wars, there was also one of the aliens who came to Earth to kickstart a war for power as well.
War that happened in the ancient past Amun-Ra wanted to continue he started the first war to take over the earth early because he didn't want to wait for his processional period to rule. And then this is the guy who says, you must say amen after everything, say amen.
Interestingly, the proof of these wars still exist until today.
You see how when you look at Earth, like from Google Earth, you see a lot of those big deserts going across. People say, oh, that's just natural geological formations over time. This has become an arid desert. No, that's war. If you go to Egypt and stick your hand deep in the sands, eventually you're gonna come up with balls of glass. How can you get glass and sand? 3,000 plus degree temperatures. You go to Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, what are you gonna see there? Dead bodies still in the streets from thousands of years ago, still holding hands, never been scavenged. The buildings that they lived in turned to glass. How can that be? We're talking about 3,000 plus degree temperature weapons fire.
At the end of the day, this ancient civilization not only had a major impact on human races, but also left an indelible mark on the religious beliefs that have been passed on till now. Jesus, religion.
Spiritual energy is coming from one source. You just have picked up a slightly different frequency of the source, and I did as well. So I'm attuned to point 1, you're attuned to point 2, and so forth and so on. And that's how it actually works.
Is Jesus part alien?
I believe so.
And was he part alien and trying to do good?
Yes, I believe so.
So he was breaking away, he was using his power, and he's like, yo, what these aliens are doing to us is
Right.
we need to break free from that,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna liberate the people.
Yes, a reincarnation of himself from a previous lifetime.
Oof.
That's why sometimes I hypothesize that he could be Thoth the Atlantean, who says that he could incarnate on and in any plane he desires. Could he have decided now to come back through the womb?
So Thoth
of
the
a human?
Atlantean was the king of the Atlantean Empire.
Yeah, he was one of them. If you were the ruler of a planet.
Yeah. Billy, I
gonna
think you might be putting on what you would do in that situation. Is that possible?
No,
That's what the Middle East best
I'm
food.
telling you, these people ate the food because I take tours to Egypt all the time. Last year I took 140 people
Oh, wow.
on a private tour.
Yeah.
And when I go, I take a homegrown Egyptologist and a homegrown guide with us.
Really?
And he built the Pyramid of the Moon at Teotihuacan as a dedication to her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Billy Carlson also talks about the return of a consciousness as revealed in the ancient tablets, the return of Christ.
He was going to return. He said that Christ would return. And he's talking about the consciousness coming back to this planet and raising everyone up to a high level and bringing back a new golden age. It's a level of consciousness where you have this crystallized consciousness where everything that you think of is about, how can I become a problem solver? I'm not a victim. How can I help someone? How can I love this person better? How can I solve problems before they happen? Because a genius will solve problems before they happen. So these people were high-level thinkers. They'll think into the future and think of what all the outcomes can be and then create solutions before they even need them. Stuff like that, creating a true super Christ civilization.
It may look like these beings only had major inputs in religion, but they could also be custodians of mind-blowing technology, ancient technology.
Right now, I think Google just created a new quantum computer that's 270 million times faster than the previous one, which is only 2 years old. Imagine those leaps and bounds in technology that we're doing right now, and now take that to another civilization that's been around for 1,000,000 years. All of a sudden, whatever they do is magic. They're gods. They can think something and it appears. They can manifest solid matter from thought. As a matter of fact, in the Emerald Tablets, Thoth talks about manifesting solid matter from photons and frequencies. And what just happened a couple of years ago in a laboratory in Europe, scientists got together and they actually, for the first time in history, manifested or created solid matter from photons and frequencies.
Now what? What's next from that?
Well, then you can have cities. You can build an entire city off of frequencies. You can manifest a city. You don't have to have people out there sweating, laboring, picking up one stone at a time.
It's safe to say that ancient technology somehow rubbed off on the current civilization. However, Billy Carlson believes that this technology was more useful in the immortality of these beings. Death, afterlife.
What is said about death and beliefs of afterlife? And then I have more questions, but let's
Well,
start
the
there.
elites believed that they were immortals because they had overcome death through two methods. One, through the elixir of life, which was this concoction, a mixture of something they would drink to heal their wounds and organs, which was a mixture of colloidal silver and monoatomic gold water, and a third substance, which we don't specifically know exactly what it was. It was some type of a bush that grew in the bottom of a river. Epic of Gilgamesh, which is one of the greatest epics in the Sumerian tales that exist, and it's in the British Museum. And then the second thing is these halls of Amenti, where where they would create these rejuvenation chambers where those would put a body in there to rejuvenate over the course of 100 years. And he said he would walk amongst men unlike a man. Then he'd come back when that body was worn out, transfer his mind or consciousness into a new body, which they're doing in 2045.com. That's through Ray Kurzweil, this project where they're creating avatars and trying to transfer human minds into new bodies. So that's crazy. So we're working on doing what happened back then. During the time of ancient Kemet, before it was called Egypt, these pharaohs, which were demigods, they were half human, half Anunnaki. Kingship was handed down to them to be the liaison between the Anunnaki and mankind after the Great Flood. Stone tablet that is covered in four-sided with ancient texts and cuneiform writing that has been deciphered for over 180 years that gives you the ruling and the kingship of these kings and the years that they ruled. One king, Alagar, will rule for 28,000 years. Another king ruling for 36,000 years. Another king rules for 14,000 years. Because in these tales, in these epics, some are actually murdered and killed through battle and war. So they can
normal
actually,
death, like
normal death,
nothing crazy.
Yeah, sometimes they can't bring them back.
Okay.
Sometimes they can bring you back, but sometimes they can't.
And why did they want to stay alive so long? Like, were they avoiding something? They know something about if they die, they go somewhere?
They just had achieved this high level of geneticism and genetics and DNA and telomere perseverance and all these different techniques to extend life.
Kind of like what we're trying to do now.
Same exact thing. We're only doing exactly what they were doing. The Egyptians, when you go from the Kemetics, so where I was going was the Kemetic people were taught about this life extension, and they were taught how to mummify. That was the original origins of mummification. They weren't taught to be mummified, that the kings would be mummified for the purpose of going into the afterlife and sailing on the solar boat. The reason why these kings would be buried in the Valley of the Kings with all their gold, all their money, their wives, their cats, right? I mean, the maids and everything else was because they believed they were going to come back and use that. It was because they were told by these beings who were their relatives that we preserve you. This is the technique to preserve your DNA. And we will clone you and we will bring you back and you will have access to your riches again. They thought they were really coming back to live life again here in the third dimension and regain control of their own kingdom.
So that's different than the standard belief of reincarnation. That is intentional.
They say that they learn how to incarnate at will. Incarnate at will on and in the plane I desire. He's talking about incarnating not only in the third dimension, he says he can incarnate into higher dimensions.
What's going on in those dimensions?
Well, there's life in every dimension. We know that the universe itself is comprised of at least 11 dimensions according to theoretical physicists, like Michio Kaku, for example. Otherwise, the universe would actually collapse. The numeric models would say that it would literally collapse on itself. The Brain Institute, about 4 years ago, that the human brain connects to 11 dimensions. So we see this connection between the brain and the universe, both having connectivity to higher dimensions. And so in each dimension is a realm. And all these dimensions are stacked directly on top of each other. We're sitting with dimensions stacked on top of us right now. They're compactified less than 1 Planck unit away from the next one in a 90-degree angle. The frequency or vibration of a higher dimension, you can walk right in, which could explain paranormal activity in our realm. Imagine a person ascends here spiritually from this dimension, leaves this avatar body behind, goes to a higher dimension, but they have the ability to match the frequency slightly of our dimension. This could be the source of paranormal activity, apparitions, and all these things. It could be beings that have ascended to higher dimensions or that already existed there that are adjusting their frequency to match slightly the subatomic frequency of the vibration of the third dimension. Just the way that I've analyzed this third dimension as being a proving ground, like you talked earlier, as a test. And it's a way for the universe to experience itself subjectively through all of us. We're all just an iteration of the actual universal consciousness. There's only one entity or one consciousness actually here. You and I sitting across this table talking to each other, we're just talking to ourselves.
How?
Because there's only one entity, there's only one consciousness.
So we're all connected.
We're all connected.
Also, Billy Carlson believes that the pyramids that made it to this age actually exist as the stamps of these ancient beings, how they lived and the kind of intelligence or technology that was available to them. Pyramids.
So I'll go into the structure of the pyramid and construction, and I'll go into why. Every block is individually custom made to fit right where it is. So that becomes very, very difficult. It's like the Great Pyramid, over 2 million blocks of stone, and nobody realized that they're all different 2 million blocks. They're each individual stone is totally different from the other one. Now you have to take into consideration also the subterranean part of the Great Pyramid. the subterranean shaft, which cuts through solid stone and goes down 65 meters, then another 30 meters down beneath that, which I've been down there. How in the world did they cut that through solid stones that were already stacked? Some type of a laser cutting tool. So once you start really analyzing the stones, the structures, the way that they're interlocked, you see there's an interlocking design system. And each stone is custom made to be put in place, which means it needs to be created at the moment that it's needed. We're talking about advanced technology, advanced beings that made that pyramid as a time capsule of incredible knowledge. A star map even is built into it to tell us who was here in the ancient past and who did it and how. When you take all the temples that are around the pyramid and the other two pyramids that are next to it, and you look at it from the sky looking down, and you connect them, you get a inner planet system of our solar system. You get the sun in the middle, you get Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. So you get the interplanetary solar system from Giza looking straight down. Well, guess what I found?
What's that?
I found Proto-Sumerian cuneiform in Mesoamerica on pottery, and also tablets that show a Proto-Sumerian metric system. And I didn't find it myself, obviously, but I found the record of it and documentation of it. It's legitimate. And so the metric system existed long before that French guy discovered it. He only rediscovered what already existed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
For Billy Carlson, there is no denying that these pyramids had the fingerprints of the ancient beings on them. But there's one more thing. The Catholics may have some things up their sleeves.
Some of these pyramid priests and temple priests realized the power that this knowledge had and began to alter and remix it. They understood the psychology and the neuroscience behind this and how it could control masses of people. So they started to twist the scripture and twist the words and kind of utilize it for darkness instead of light. So when you start to look at the Americas, you discover that there were so many pyramids in the Americas. There were literally thousands of them. What happened to them? The Catholic Church blew up the tops of these pyramids and built churches on top of them.
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Come on, bro. Mark, bro.
Oh no, they just know that we gotta eradicate this civilization science because we want to impose our will on the people.
Do you know which church in America or which churches are on old pyramids?
Oh no, you just have to go out there. See anything on, most of the older ones that are on hills with the triptych windows. The triptych windows are the same windows that mimic the three windows that you see in a lot of the pyramids. That's the triptych, yes.
Wow.
At the top of all Catholic churches, the older ones, they all have that triptych design. And most of the ones that are old in the 1800s built on those hills were
Go to the Mexico City pyramids and do it before excavation. Because what happens is grass just starts to grow on them.
Yes.
So they just start to look like terrain.
Yeah.
And-
Hills.
Yeah, they just look
big
like
ass
hills.
Speaking of the Catholics, Billy Carlson seems to have seen into all their dark secrets. Inquisition.
See, the Catholic Church went through something called the Inquisitions.
Yes.
It was the papal Inquisitions where they went around the planet and they killed and tortured and murdered 80 million people. So it wasn't spread like they tell you in church, the gospel means the good news. It was really bad news when these people showed up. It would
was
be
by
like
force.
America showing up to your country and you have oil buried in the ground. They just had all these torture mechanisms.
Yeah.
What they would do is get the leader, the king, the chief, the guy who does all the sage and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The medicine man.
Yeah.
And then they would say, look, we need to convert everyone to this. And if you don't, then we're going to kill you.
It is the good word.
Under the order of Rome.
Yeah.
And but the thing Rome said was, look, we got to get this money.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to convert our pagan system into a Christian system. We're going to combine the two together. That's why we have all these fake holidays that are all pagan holidays in Christianity. And so once they reeled up the leader of that village or that town and killed him like that, and everyone saw it, it was like, okay, I'm ready to learn now. Teach me your language. Talk to me about your God. By the second, third generation, you're born, you're given a name, a race, and a religion, and you don't even know who you are.
The Inquisition may sound like the dirtiest thing about the Catholics, but there seems to be more going on in the Vatican. In fact, it could have a lot to do with the ancient beings. The Vatican.
There's two versions of the tablets. There's an Emerald Tablet of Thoth, which is a singular tablet located at Cambridge. And there's the Emerald Tablets, plural, of Thoth, and those are located in the Vatican Archive in Rome.
So I know there's the burning of the Library of Alexandria where they lost a lot of the information, but
I think that might have been a book heist.
Really?
Yeah, I think the burning of the Library of Alexandria was a heist. The burning did happen, don't get me wrong, but that was just a distraction to steal the knowledge, and that the majority of that knowledge ended up in the Vatican archives.
Do what they have. So there's always been speculation that they have some wild shit written down in there.
Yeah, some wild stuff. I mean, they're investigating aliens. If you look at Teotihuacan,
You mean the dimensions?
Not the dimensions, but just the actual shape of that courtyard, it matches the courtyard of Teotihuacan. So
Really?
yeah, it's an incredible coincidence that they built it based on the Teotihuacan, where the Avenue of the Dead has those platforms, and then you have the Pyramid of the Sun on the right, and the Pyramid of the Moon straight ahead. You know,
Right.
I mean, one of the Pope's
Most recent
astronomers,
speeches.
you know, they were talking about years ago, though. They were talking about years ago that they wanted to, the Pope wanted to baptize the first alien.
That would be hilarious.
And then they built this telescope called Lucifer to look for alien life.
That's not a good name.
Yeah.
You would think anybody who would know better.
Right, the light bearers, you know, what Lucifer means supposedly, but yeah, they built a telescope named Lucifer.
Most times, Billy Carlson says that he is at risk for spilling these secrets, but he has probably faced most of these risks in the past. And one of them would be his most traumatic alien encounter, which later cost him his family. Alien encounter.
I was working on this project. I come home, I'm looking at ESPN, and I'm looking at sports about 9 o'clock p.m. All the lights turn dim, the TV turns off, and I thought my kids were playing a trick on me because they lived up in the room behind me, up on the second floor. And I look up, and there's nobody there. When I turn around, there were these two beings right there. They had the big almond eyes like you see on TV. I swear they did.
So you have two beings in front of
But
you.
they didn't look like they were real eyes. They looked like coverings of some type. And they didn't communicate with me through any kind of telepathy that I can tell, but I felt like my brain was shaking in my skull to the point where it started hurting, and I started screaming, but no sound was coming out of my throat. It was just traumatic for everybody, you know? And it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. There was other reasons why, but you know, I ended up my one son, Giovanni, he's told me I'm scared to even come around you, and still to this day, he rarely ever calls me or comes around. It's kind of like I lost my son. I made no money off of this. I got no exposure off of this. That's why I kept it quiet for so long. You know, lost my family. We were on a highway one day, and my wife was driving at the time, my ex-wife, and she slammed on the brakes, and you know, it was like, just get out of the car, you know, because the kids were scared, and I was like, I'm sticking to my story. I'm not changing my story because this really happened to me, and they just didn't want to hear it. But her parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, so everything was of the devil, you know.